Downton Abbey is a confusing show. Hardly anyone ever says exactly what they mean, so it took me forever to figure out what was going on. But now, after finally finishing all of Season 1, I can finally say that I get it. So to save you the trouble of watching it yourself, here's all of Season 1 in just a little over 6 minutes. In the first episode, we're introduced to a bunch of stuffy rich English people who more or less all look alike. There's Lord Robert Grantham, head of the household, his wife Cora, and all of the people they own, or employ. Rob reads in the paper that the Titanic is sunk and realizes that his cousin and nephew were killed, leaving him to wonder who will inherit his fortune because he has all daughters and girls can't be heirs. Lord Grantham also hires a new valet, which they pronounce valet, I don't know why. The valet, Mr. Bates, has a limp, which makes the other servants think that he's inept, but as it turns out, he got the job because he used to be Lord Grantham's personal Batman during the Boer War, but not like you'd think. Bates was more like Alfred to Lord Grantham's Bruce Wayne, except he never became a crime fighter because his mom's still alive and the comparison ends there. The rest is pretty boring except for the moment when someone almost gets poisoned, but just kidding, crisis averted. Also, Thomas the Footman is gay and tries to blackmail the closeted Duke of Crowbar. Episode 2. Matthew, the new heir, comes to Downton with his mom to see what kind of cool shit he's going to inherit. Grandma Violet openly talks trash to Matt's mom because she's too old to give a damn about what anyone thinks, which makes her basically the best part of the show. Matt says he also wants to get a job, which everyone thinks is ridiculous because rich, pretty boys are supposed to just be rich and do nothing all day, and everyone tries to tell him that he should marry his cousin Mary, and he's like, no thanks. Meanwhile, Carson, who I just figured out isn't Mr. Bates, has been stealing food for his former vaudeville partner who's been blackmailing him because apparently being an entertainer is mortifying compared to being a butler. Then, Matt's mom performs an old-school rendition of the adrenaline to the heart scene from Pulp Fiction, much to the surprise of Professor McGonagall. Then Professor McGonagall is all like, Mary, you should marry your cousin, and Mary's like, fuck you, I won't do what you tell me. A rich guy named Evelyn, yes, Evelyn, visits the house with his Turkish friend Pamuk, who, despite being Turkish, is basically as British as the rest of them. Thomas tries to kiss Pamuk, who's all, hey, I'm a fancy boy, but not fancy like that, and he blackmails Thomas into helping him sneak into Mary's room later that night so they can make with the sexy time. Mary's sister Edith tries to flirt with cousin Matthew by offering to show him the churches since Mary's not interested. Matt's like, hey, cool buildings, but isn't interested in Edith because she's basically this show's Meg Griffin in the sense that she's ugly and no one likes her. Bates gets a metal cage for his messed up leg, which just messes it up even worse, and he throws it in a river. Yay, medicine! Also, Gwen the Ginger is learning to type so she can become a secretary, aka get a real job. Pamuk the Turk finally gets into Mary's bedroom where they have sex, but it's too much for him and he dies. So Mary, her mom Cora, and Anna the maid move his body back to his room to avoid scandal, but Daisy, the Meg Griffin of the downstairs servants area, sees everything. Episode 4. William has a crush on Daisy, but Daisy's got a crush on Thomas, and she hasn't figured out that he's gay. Thomas is also kind of a dick, so he takes Daisy to the fair just to annoy William. Mr. Carson notices that even after he's stopped stealing food for himself, things are still going missing. Sybil, the youngest daughter, rides around in a carriage talking to the Irish socialist chauffeur Branson, and they bond over politics and feminism. Remember, the Bolshevik Revolution is still like 6 years away, so talking about Marx is still totally kosher. Mr. Batman catches Thomas stealing wine, but he's such a decent dude that he doesn't turn him in right away. But Thomas and his cohort, Mrs. O'Brien, are both evil incarnate, and they plot to frame the Batman, but Anna and Batman are too smart for them, and they thwart their plans. Meanwhile, Daisy is still freaked out about Mr. Pamuk's death, and she tells Mrs. Hughes, who I've just realized is an entirely separate person from Mrs. O'Brien, who tells her to tell Edith. Both Meg Griffins are in the same room at the same time, and the universe nearly implodes. Edith writes a letter to the Turkish ambassador to slut-shame her sister because being Meg Griffin is hard. Also, there's a flower show where the Reverend Mother from Sister Act talks trash to cousin Matthew's mom, but then ends up giving the award to the elder Mr. Molesley. Episode 6. Sybil goes to a political rally with the Irish chauffeur, which gets her dad royally or at least aristocratically pissed off. Edith's slut-shaming rumor has reached Granny Wendy, who's so shocked that she thinks she's too good for her own family all of a sudden. Edith takes a liking to some crusty old dude, mostly because she just wants to make Mary jealous. Meanwhile, Mary's like, yay, have fun with that. O'Brien and Thomas try once again to frame the Batman for wine thieving, even getting the impressionable Daisy to lie to Mr. Carson to support their story. But her conscience gets the best of her, she admits to the lying, and Carson is like, yeah, I didn't think Batman was a thief anyway. Then, for some reason, Bates decides to tell everybody about how he used to be a thief and a drunkard, and he tries to resign. Carson's like, bullshit, there's more to this story, and we're not going to fire you. Against her father's wishes, Sybil goes out to another rally, which turns into a riot, resulting in a head injury. Branson and Matthew take Sybil back home, and everybody's pretty sure Branson's going to be fired, but then he's not. Mary and her cousin Matthew confess their love for each other, but they don't want anyone to know just yet. Not because incest is gross, but because they like being independent. Meanwhile, Mrs. Medlock and Lady Cora talk about taking Mary to Italy to find an Italian dude who won't be so picky. A few months have passed and the family's been away at London, and everyone's nervous about the assassination of Franz Ferdinand. Lady Cora got pregnant for the first time in 18 years, meaning that if the baby turns out to be a boy, then Cousin Matthew inherits nothing. That dude named Evelyn from a few episodes ago visits Mary in London and tells her that it was Edith who spread the rumor about Mr. Pamuk and not he. Carson and others discover that Mr. Bates stole a bunch of silver while in the army. Anna takes the cook to London to get her cataracts cut off and makes a pit stop to visit Batman's mom, who tells her that he took the fall for his thieving ex-wife. While the cook is out, there's a new cook and there's more drama in the kitchen, and that was all mildly entertaining but ultimately didn't make any impact on anything. Mr. Molesley catches Thomas trying to steal from Mr. Carson's wallet, and he's about to turn him in when Thomas hands in his resignation to join the Army Medical Corps. Mary confronts Edith about her rumor and spoils everything between Edith and the crusty old guy that she was with just to try to make her sister jealous. Then O'Brien, being the evil old bag that she is, leaves a bar of soap on the floor for Cora to slip on. She does, and the baby is dead. Turns out, it was a boy. Oh yeah, they got a telephone installed, and Gwen the Ginger becomes the telephone repairman's secretary. Mr. Molesley tells Carson that he thinks Anna's pretty cute, and Carson tells him to back off like a boss. Then Robert gets a telegram announcing the beginning of World War I. The end.